go. All right. Good morning, everybody. And we are back. I think it's part 34. Part 34 of Revelation. We are going to, Lord willing, finish up chapter 12, maybe get into chapter 13. I don't know how fast or slow this is going to go. There's a lot again. So we'll see. But as you remember, we're in chapter 12. We covered verses 7 through 12 last time. So I'll review that so we can remember what's going on. Remember, this is the chapter that confuses everybody. But as we've been learning the past couple weeks, when you take this chapter and you start breaking it down and you start looking at your Bible, reading your Bible, it's very understandable, right? So that's what we've been doing. We've been learning about this woman who's been Israel, the red dragon, who was, Satan, and he's tried to eat her child, which we said was Jesus Christ, which could also later symbolize the church as well. And the baby gets away. Jesus, is the ascension. You can see him get away there. And this whole battle, this cosmic battle that has started since Genesis chapter 3. And then we learned about the war that took place that we hear about. It says, now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. So remember, Michael and the good angels fighting Satan and his evil fallen angels. And Michael wins. And remember, notice, Jesus is not fighting in this because Satan is not an equal. He's not an equal of Jesus. And sometimes we get it confused. I mentioned last week that we think it's Satan versus Jesus. Satan is, lashed out like all the other angels, but he's not an equal. He is a creation. And Christ is a creator, right? So there's no match. So he sends Michael to do his bidding, and Michael is able to defeat him. Why? He's got God on his side, right? So he's able to defeat Satan, and he kicks him out of heaven. There's no longer any room. Remember, like right now he has access. He goes back and forth accusing. One day, he'll be kicked out completely. This war's been going on. It talks about when he was thrown down, his fall, his moral fall and failure, right? Of his first fall. But this one's talking about a physical fall where he'll be trapped on this earth, which you can understand why the tribulation will be so hellacious. It will be hell on earth, essentially. He will be down here. He won't be able to go back and forth to the spirit world anymore. So imagine right now what the headlines might look like if Satan himself had to take on a body or however it works and not be able to leave the earth. It'll get rather interesting, and that's kind of how it's going to go. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent. See, it ties it back to Genesis 3, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. So they celebrate. Remember, this ties back to the end of chapter 11, right? This ties back to all of that. It's tying into that. The Lord, his kingdom has come now. So this is part of that process. You're going to start to see Satan get evicted. He's kicked out of heaven, and then he'll be locked up, and then when he gets released, he'll be thrown into the lake of fire. So that's why they're celebrating this beginning, and Satan's been evicted, right? The angry, resident of heaven is gone, so they're cheering. He's no longer able to accuse the believers, right? They have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. Saying how the martyrs actually conquered Satan, that reversal then, through the blood of the Lamb. Victory always comes through Christ, not through human action. It's right there, that's how they defeated him, it said. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them, but woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So of course he got thrown out of heaven, down to earth, and now he knows his time is short. He can't even access the heavens, and he's full of wrath, like anybody who's losing a fight and is going to lose ends up being. And their celebration in heaven, they're celebrating. Why? Because, again, Satan's kicked out. But why? There's woe on earth and sea. Why? Because Satan has been kicked out. He is now down on earth, and now they have to live with him. And he's going to cause all kinds of havoc. And it says earth and sea, covering the whole physical sphere down here. And it's also going to tie in, as we're about to see in chapter 13 later on, to the two beasts. There's actually two of them. We think of the beast because of the mark of the beast. That's the first beast. There's also a false prophet. But we'll get to that. That's kind of what's setting this up here. And then now we're going to jump right back in with verse 13, picking back up here. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. So now it says when the dragon saw, so this is full awareness, right? This is he knows his time is short. When he saw, he got thrown down. I'm just imagining, it's in my mind. He stands up like, what happened? And then he realized, I can't get back into heaven, right? So when he saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he had been expelled, right? We're going to see, he starts to pursue the woman, right? So you're going to start to see this whole war. He just had war in heaven, right? And he was defeated by Michael and his angels. So now he's going to go to war on earth. He's going to focus everything. He can't do anything in heaven. Now he's going to war on earth. He's still in war mode, right? So that's what's happening. And it says he pursued the woman. Since he had seen he was thrown out of the earth, he pursued the woman. Of course, we know that woman is Israel from studying, right? But pursued, it literally means like a relentless chase or a hunt. He was hunting down women, hunting down Israel. So this target is Israel. And we would have known about this. Turn to Jeremiah chapter 30. Jeremiah chapter 30, and go to verse number 7. So he's pursuing the woman. He gets thrown out of the earth, says he's pursuing the woman who had given birth to the male child, which again, we had already done our homework the past couple of weeks. We know this to be Israel, and referring to giving birth is to Jesus Christ. But the target is Israel. In Jeremiah in chapter 30, Jeremiah was prophesied about this. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse number 7. Here's what mine says. Jeremiah 30, verse 7. Alas, that day is so great, there is none like it. So it's talking about this tribulation. It is a time of distress for Jacob, yet he shall be saved out of it. So, any Bible scholars out there, what is Jacob in the Bible had another name? What was it? Israel, right? So, you could also say, this is a time of distress for Israel, yet he shall be saved out of it. So here you can see the focus, exactly what Jeremiah wrote about. It would be a terrible time for Israel. It's going to be a terrible time for everybody on earth, right? But it's going to be a terrible time for Israel because this is the 70th week of Daniel, and everything is pivoted back onto them. So it's going to be a terrible time, a time of Jacob's trouble. And here's the thing about that, which is really helpful, is Jacob. So Israel, the church is sometimes, church in Israel, the spiritual Israel thing, there's that whole debate. But there's never, the term Jacob is never used for the church ever. It's only ever used for the nation of Israel. So that is specifically there talking about the nation of Israel, just from that clue there. So it's going to be an intense time for Israel. So basically Satan has turned his attention. He couldn't get the child. He couldn't get Jesus when he was born and the ascension. So now he's turning his attention to Israel. And remember, this also refers to the rapture because we are the body of Christ, Jesus Christ, who ascended. We are going to be raptured, and he's not able to get the church, so then he's going to pivot to Israel, right? That's what this is kind of hitting at here. He's going to be so furious, he'll pivot and focus on Israel this time, and anybody else, obviously, who follows Christ. But it's really focused on Israel, and it doesn't just say, or the woman, pursued the woman. Very clear, John is to say, who had given birth to the male child. Now, we already know this is Jesus, so why do we need to know this again? The reason he's probably repeating it is to show that Satan's hatred is rooted in Jesus. Even though we keep saying Israel, 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 this is all focused on Israel now. It's to wake them up to Jesus. But he's not really hateful to Israel just because they're Israel. He's hateful because it's part of God's plan, and Christ is going to come back and rule over this nation of Israel. So this is really all about still the male child. He just couldn't grab the male child. It's kind of like, you see people, they're mad at somebody and the person gets away so they hurt the next person next to him. That's kind of how this is going. He really wants Jesus, but Jesus is gone. He took off, so now he's focusing on Israel because of Jesus. It's not really about Israel. It's still about Jesus. That's our clue. That's why it's there. If it wasn't there, I'd say, oh, he just hates Israel too. But this is really about because she gave birth to the male child. That's what this is all about. That's why she's the enemy, and she's part of God's plan because he promised in the end to wake them up. Satan's read Romans 9 through 11. He knows it just like we do, and that's why. Because this is really about Genesis chapter 3. Remember, this whole thing's about Genesis chapter 3, really. This is Satan and God at war with Adam, or Eve, the serpent, or the seed of Eve and the seed of the serpent. That's what's about to unfold here. We're going to eventually turn to the seed of the serpent here in a little bit. But it's this conflict going on, really. So you can see here, Israel, from this verse we learn, Israel obviously is going to remain central to end times prophecy, but the only reason being because they're associated with Jesus, right? And we also know, and you can see this throughout the Bible, you see this throughout the world. This is another thing we can learn. When an enemy often misses an attack, he'll redirect his attack to people around them. We see that happen. That's how Satan works. When Satan has you as a target, and he can't get you, he might shift to something around you, right? Because he can't get to Jesus, so he's going to what's precious, right? The people that he promised to save, so he's going to go after them. And you can see he's redirecting his fight and attack. But look at this. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. Again, at face value, this sounds so strange. This serpent's trying to eat this woman who had a baby, and the baby got away and was able to fly away in the sky. And Now he's going to eat, but now this woman flies away on wings of an eagle. What is going on? Well, very confusing if you haven't read your Bible, but we've read our Bibles, and we're going to go back and reflect on this. First, but the woman was given. What does that mean? But there's a divine intervention, right? So Satan, this is his plan, and Satan's going to attack her, but God has different plans, and God trumps Satan, right? This shows there's going to be divine intervention. It's exactly what we see. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle. Now, this is symbolic imagery. I don't think that like all the Israelites, people in Israel will like have these wings or that birds will pick them up. Maybe God will do that. I don't know. I don't really think that's what it's actually getting at here, because turn to Exodus chapter 19. Exodus chapter 19. A lot of times in the Bible, when it talks about things like, for example, the eagle here, it doesn't always mean obviously a physical, actual eagle. It's more like a supernatural deliverance we're going to see, where God supernaturally will deliver people. When he uses the terms of eagle. Exodus chapter 19, and then look at verse number 3. You can see this imagery all the way back in Exodus. Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, there it is, and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians. This is God talking. And how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And yet you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. Interesting. That was Exodus chapter 19, right? That was when God delivered Israel out of Egypt, right? He sent Moses to deliver them out of Egypt. And he's again going to do this. This is a pattern. This is the Exodus pattern happening again. God is using the exact same language, saying, remember the last time? Remember when you guys were in Egypt and I saved you then? I'm going to do the same thing for you guys now, thousands of years later. That's what he's saying, using the exact same language that we see here, because God is going to repeat the pattern. We just saw the Genesis pattern. We see the Genesis pattern of chapter 3. We're going to see the Exodus pattern here as well in this section of the chapter here. But the emphasis is really here on the fact that the 2 wings of the great eagle, the fact they escaped to the wilderness is not on their own. That's saying like they needed some supernatural thing, because people don't have wings of eagles, and we don't usually get transported by eagles. It's not a transportation service where we're at, right? So this is a supernatural thing. God is the one who is rescued. That's why, but doesn't have to say God, because based on the context, we know that God is intervening. It's God's protection. Go to Deuteronomy 32. If you're still in Exodus, you're pretty close. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 32. Again, this is the time of Moses, and they are in the wilderness. They're about to go, Deuteronomy, this is the end of Deuteronomy. They're about to go into the promised land, and Moses is giving his final speech. Deuteronomy chapter 32, and go to verse number 10. We got more proof of this. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 10. He found him in a desert land, and in the howling waste of the wilderness. He encircled him, he cared for him, he kept him as the apple of his eye, like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, catching them, beating them on its pinions. The Lord alone guided him. No foreign God was with him. Isn't that interesting? Again, he's talking about Israel and Egypt. He even mentions the wilderness there, and not much later, like an eagle that stirs its nest, spreading out its wings, right? The Lord alone guided him. This is the exact same language, so this is not new. This is not some weird vision. Now maybe he got this vision, but this is not some weird brand new thing that we can't figure out. This is actually a repeat. The Bible, if you haven't figured out now, is a lot of repeats, a lot of reruns, right? If you're familiar with reruns, it's a bunch of reruns, and if you understand this, you can understand the original, you can predict what's coming next. It's kind of predictable in a certain way. And if you miss it, God's sending us back here. Like, go back to Exodus. If you know what this is about, if you want to know, go back to when Israel was brought through the wilderness, and you learn how they were miraculously brought through in all those ways. That is what God is getting at, that God protects his people. Psalm 55, we see similar reference to wings, okay? Psalm 55, I'll read this for time's sake. Psalm 55, verses 5 through 8, says, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death fall upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horrors overwhelm me. And I say, oh, that I had wings. Like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. Yes, I would wander far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. That's, by the way, that's Psalm 55. You want to read that. It talks about if somebody in trouble, if they could just only have these wings to fly away and they would hide in the wilderness. Isn't that interesting language? All spread throughout your Bibles, all throughout the Old Testament, this has actually been in there. And then John's just told to write it as a reference point for us, essentially, right? So it says, so that she, to the place where she is, hold on, let's go back. But the woman was given two wings of the great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent. Of course, the serpent being Satan, flying from the serpent, meaning a separation from danger, right? Protection from a direct attack, right? Into the wilderness. Now, if you're in Revelation 12 still, look back at verse number 6, 8 verses ago. And the woman fled into the wilderness. There it is, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So it's tying this directly to verse 6, what we already learned about earlier. So it's tying back to this thing before, that she is going to be protected in the wilderness and nourished for 1,260 days, which again we'll get here for a time and times and half a time. Now there's a lot of debate. Where in the wilderness are they going to go hide? And some people probably think, well, we can't know, because then if we know the hiding spot, we'll be able to find it. Well, I think you can still know it, because by then, if you notice in prophecy, Daniel was told things very clearly, and then later people forget about it. And that's usually what happens in prophecy, they'll forget about it. But I do believe there's a good chance, you've probably heard this before, that they are going to go to a place that we modern day, well, in ancient times it was called Selah, S-E-L-A, or Bozrah, B-O-Z-R-A-H. But today, it's in the modern nation of Jordan, and it's called Petra. You've probably heard of Petra, okay? And the name Bozrah, the ancient name of Petra in Jordan. By the way, if you want to look up some amazing things where I think they're going to hide out, you can actually go see probably where they're going to live. If you type in Petra, Jordan, and go on YouTube, you can watch a video. You can actually, I've done tours on my Oculus before with it. It's amazing if you see these structures that were carved out and stuff that are already there. But Bozrah literally translates to the word sheepfold. That's another clue, because a sheepfold is an enclosure designed to protect sheep from predators. Isn't that interesting? The whole name of this place, Bozrah, means to protect sheep, right? So, but why am I picking Bozrah? I can't just pick a random spot, and these commentators can't pick random spots. So go to Micah chapter 2. This is our first clue. We have 3 clues. And maybe we're not right, maybe we're not, and we won't be here anyway, I don't think, but it's fun to know. It's fun to know that we can know probably where the Israelites are going to hide. The Jews are going to hide safely, that God will protect them. Micah chapter 2, verse number 2. I'm going to read the King James Version, is the one you have to kind of get the language with Bozrah on it to get the clue. So here I'll read in the King James. Micah chapter 2, verse number 2. It says, I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Bozrah. As the flock in the midst of their fold, they shall make great noise by reason of the multitude of men. So in Micah chapter 2, he gets this prophecy that he will take, there it is, Jacob or Israel, both mentioned there, as the sheep of Bozrah, right? Bozrah, remember the sheepfold. Bozrah being this place in Jordan. Go to Isaiah chapter 16. Isaiah chapter 16 is our other clue. Isaiah chapter 16, verse 1. This one talks about the end of this time period. This is going to be a prophecy about when Israel is leaving the wilderness at the end of the Great Tribulation, this 3.5-year period. This time and times and half a time, at the end of this is what this prophecy is about, Isaiah 16. Isaiah 16, verse number 1, it will be. And it's amazing just to see. Now this time it's going to be called Selah. S-E-L-A, because before Bozrah, remember, all these towns' names change all the time. Now it's called Petra. But it used to be called Selah, S-E-L-A. Look at Isaiah, first verse of chapter 16. Send the lamb to the ruler of the land from Selah by way of the desert to the mount of the daughters of Zion. Isn't that interesting? So there's language of the lamb. Send the lamb, that's Jesus' language. Selah is this Bozrah place, this Petra place, by way of the desert to the mount. Almost talking about coming from this place back to Jerusalem, which is what's going to happen to the Jews. They're not going to hang out in the wilderness forever. It's only going to be 3.5 years. Then they got to go back, which there's a lot of talk about how that'll happen. And stay in Isaiah if you're there. Now go chapter 63. Isaiah chapter 63, the first verse again, talking about the same period. Isaiah, same prophet, gets the same language this time. again, it's going to use the term Bozrah instead of Selah. It's the same Exodus pattern we're going to see. Exodus 63, verse number 1. Here's what it says. Isaiah 63, verse 1. Who is this who comes from Edom in crimsoned garments from Bozrah? He who is splendid in his apparel, marching in the greatness of his strength. It is I, speaking in righteousness, mighty to save. Now, who is Isaiah talking about there? I think we know pretty well there. There's crimson stained garments. Crimson, that's red. Blood, we always say that with crimson, right? From Bozrah. Later it says, it is I, mighty to save. That's Jesus Christ himself. Isaiah is getting a prophecy again of this end times, it seems like, and he's mentioning Bozrah. He mentions that he's going to save them, out of here. It comes from Edom in crimson garments, marching, and he's the one to save, just like we read earlier in chapter 16. That is why we believe when they get hidden in the wilderness, they'll be hidden at the ancient place of Bozrah or Selah, which is now modern Petra. Now, it could be wrong. Maybe that's not the case, but when you look this place up, it looks prepared. It looks prepared like it could be where they're going to be, which is really interesting. But the whole point of the wilderness isn't about where they're going to be at, although we could maybe guess, but about why they're there. What is the wilderness in the Bible? Well, the wilderness is often a time, a place of testing. Remember, Jesus had to go out into the wilderness for 40 days, right? The Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years. So there's this time of testing, also a time of protection, because they were protected, right? Jesus survived it, and so did the Israelites, and also dependence on God. So when you're out in the wilderness, you can't really go to your local grocery store for stuff, right? You can't go for anything. You've got to depend on God for everything. So when you're in the wilderness, you have nothing and you depend on God. So it's going to, what is the whole point of this, by the way, for Israel? It is not to crush and kill Israel. That's not what the tribulation is about. It's to wake them up, to get them to depend on the one Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who they're blind to. He's opening their eyes and getting them to depend on him. This is the way he's doing it. He's done this before with Israel. This is not new. This is the Exodus pattern again. But they're going to be safe under God's care. That's what he's doing here. It's not to destroy them, but to preserve them. Because it says to a place where she is to be nourished, right? So sustained or cared for is what that means. God's provision, whether it's going to be manna or whatever it's going to be. But this is not just an escape and saves you for a day or two. This is ongoing preservation for 3.5 years. They're going to be fed however God's going to feed them and get water however God's going to give it to them. This will be ongoing, just like it has been in the past. This is nothing new for God, right? He's done this before. He'll do it for a time and times and half a time. There again, all the different ways we've been seeing this broken down. Earlier, like I said, in verse number 6, it had, 1,260 days, I think. And I told you about the 360-day calendar. It comes out to be 3.5. Here's the other way to say it. Time equals a year in this language. So a time, 1 year, times 2 years, half a time, half a year is what that means in that language. So 1 year plus 2 year plus half a year is 3.5, right? Also known in other places earlier, last chapter, I think it was also called 42 months. 42 divided by 12 is also 3.5. So again, I say this often, but if you think this is symbolic, the Holy Spirit probably wants to reach out and smack you a little bit because he said it 3 different times, or so many ways. 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. If you guys don't think that's literal, I don't even know how to help you at this point. That's pretty clear, right? Daniel 7, it's actually talked about this time, by the way. He shall speak words against the Most High. He shall wear out the saints of the Most High. He shall think to change the times of the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. The exact same language that we saw in Daniel chapter 7 with the beast, which maybe we'll have time to get into. But what do we learn from this verse here? Well, that divine deliverance is often supernatural, but it's not always obvious. So although we think it's going to look like, we expect when we get these miracles and we pray to God, we expect him to answer as if an eagle's going to come down and pick us up, right? But sometimes he answers it just through the person down the street coming and doing something that looks really ordinary, right? So I don't think it sounds extraordinary, but it's going to maybe look ordinary because I bet if you watch the wilderness, other than the Red Sea, and you can probably see some other things, sometimes God will make things look very ordinary, but he's rescuing you. And he's doing that all the time in our lives today. This is a more extreme version, but even then, he's not going to pick him up with eagle's wings. It's going to probably look fairly natural, but it's going to be a supernatural protection that might look natural, which is very similar to what we see in our lives, right? Verse number 15 gets more interesting here. So what does the serpent do? The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. So the serpent, again, we know that's Satan. He poured water like a river out of his mouth. So water like a river out of his mouth. Why out of his mouth? That's important. And we're going to see a lot in Revelation. It's talking about the mouth. Well, the mouth is a place of influence, right? That's where you speak. You can have influence. You can command. You can have, put out commands or directives. You can also deceive. It's also used to tell lies, right? So I think all of those are going to come into play. When this flood comes out of his mouth, again, I don't think Satan is going to come down, he's trapped on earth, is going to open his mouth and have this like water ability. I don't think that's what it's talking about, although we'll get to that, what it might be. I think the part of the mouth, what it's talking about, is that he's going to use deception and lies through his system, right? And the influence that he's going to have. And it says water like a river, right? An overwhelming rapid force, probably like a water that's rushing, like the rapids where you go whitewater rafting, right? That kind of a thing. Water, it's going to be destructive, and it's meant to destroy. It's not just a stream of water for her to swim in. This is to wipe her out, right? Now here's possible interpretations. What is this flood? He's going to sweep her with a flood, these water like a river. What is it going to be? Well, it could be, what's really interesting, there's this one really random one. This is part of it maybe, and maybe it has nothing to do with it, but there's a chance, maybe there's actual flood with the weather, I don't know. Because the angelic beings, they can have control over the weather. We'll see that later in Revelation. God gives them abilities. Perhaps they bring torrential downpour and a flash flood. That might be part of it. And if that even does happen, we're not even sure that's going to happen. Because I don't think it's really focusing on the literal aspect of the flood or the water. Potentially, they'll send flash floods in part of the attack. I don't know. There might be some water aspect, and I'll get to that probably because of the Red Sea. So if there is going to be some flash flood from this, it would be reflecting back on the Red Sea situation. But a bigger thing will probably be deception. There'll be a lot of propaganda. We're going to see a lot of anti-Semitic lies. We're already starting to see that happen, actually, by the way. Anti-Semitism is beginning now. And, it's always around, but it's going to grow into a monster to where it will be very mainstream and push. I think there's going to be a lot of deception, a lot of propaganda. We're used to that today. We see a lot of that today. It's going to be even worse in the end times. The deception and the propaganda will be so bad, you won't even have your YouTubes and your rabbit holes to go down. There'll be nobody telling the truth anymore. You won't be able to find it. So there's that. But even bigger, and I think the main thing it's talking about, I think propaganda will happen. I think there could be some crazy storms that take place, or whatever maybe. But I think what it's really talking about is a massive, overwhelming military attack. To the point the Antichrist, we're going to get to him, he has this peace with Israel for 7 years it's supposed to last. 3.5 years in, he breaks this deal, and I think he's not only going to break it, he's going to send directives to his entire military force, his Air Force, his Navy, every Jew you see, every person in Israel you see, wipe them out. And he's going to send the military after him. That's what I believe. Could you imagine a whole military attack on a group of people? Not just on their lead. Because right now, by the way, think about this. We still have these, we pretend that we have these like laws, international war laws, where you can't go after women, children, innocent civilians. You have to go after these certain areas. That's going to be out the window. We have never seen wars where you're allowed to target civilians. When we see about bombs on the TV, they do hit civilians, but they're not supposed to be aiming for them. They're supposed to be only aiming at specific areas. That will be gone, I believe. I believe the propaganda will be so bad, it'll be something like worse than you've seen from Hitler and worse from Haman in the past in the Bible, where they're going to tell you that Israel is the cause of all of your evil, all these Jews, and the only way is to get rid of all of them and all their evil. They won't bow down to me. They will not play a part of this. You need to kill them all. I'm sending my military, and if you guys see them, shoot them. It's probably going to be the directives. That's the propaganda that's going to play into it. That's going to be the military. And why do I think all this is going to happen? Because it's happened before. Pharaoh did this. You guys all know this. Pharaoh did this. God was protecting them, and Satan attacked them. It was Satan. Remember, we've been reading this. All of these kingdoms have been run by Satan. That's why the dragon looks like it does. It represents all kingdoms. And remember, I said that Egypt's probably the first one out of those 7 that it counts. So that was Satan. And what did he do? What did Satan do through Pharaoh? He pursued the woman in the wilderness, and God had to rescue her through the water. She was trapped at the Red Sea, brought her through the waters. And who were they escaping from? A big military attack. He sent the whole military after this group of people, and the women and the children, and said, kill them all. So this has happened before. That's why I know it'll happen again. And the Antichrist will do something like this through the power of Satan. That's why I believe another sign of the end times. I don't think Israel's perfect. I don't agree with everything the government does over there. But a big sign is you're seeing the prep work. It's not going to be really hard to... I used to think it was going to be hard to convince America to hate Israel. It's not. It's already done. It's already complete. The work's done. So we are very close to this, but that's what I believe it's talking about here. After that woman, again, it's Israel to sweep her away with a flood to total annihilation. Have you ever heard of that before? The total annihilation of Israel. It's what you hear. I've actually started to hear Americans say this. There's actually a guy running for Congress in Florida right now that said he would go to war and kill Israelis. He's running for Congress. Look this up. This is true. So they want to wipe out. They're talking about, there's Americans now that says, I'm not saying we should kill the Jews, but they shouldn't have a country of Israel. That's our real narrative right now. These are our real narratives. So when people say you're standing for Israel, it's not like that you're standing for all their bombing. It's that their right to exist as a nation, because the whole world's going to want to wipe them out again soon. It's already happening, and it's in America now. So like it's worse than I've ever seen it before. But this is what, remember, this is all biblical. This is what Haman did. Read the book of Esther. That's what this is. He tried to kill him with a flood then. That was Haman and the gallows. Remember, he ended up getting hung on it because God can always turn the things. Hitler, same thing. He gave the directives, kill all the Jews. If they're hiding in your house, I want to see them. I want to kill them all. I don't care if it's women and children. We got to kill them all. This has been a pattern. This is not new. This has happened over and over and over again, starting all the way back with Pharaoh, right? And it's going to continue on, and that's why we see it. Go to Psalm 124. Psalm 124, this is interesting again. This was prophesied in the Psalms, the same passage again. So what's neat about this psalm again is prophecy is pattern. So again, it's already happened. It's going to happen again. This is just more proof of what I just said. What I told you about was prophesied in the Psalms, which are already over 1,000 years old in our time. Psalm 124. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side when people rose against us, then they would have swallowed us up alive when their anger was kindled against us. Then the flood would have swept us away. The torrent would have gone over us. Look at that flood language. Then over us would have gone the raging waters. Blessed be the Lord who has not given us as prey to their teeth. We have escaped like a bird from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. So there it was. You guys had no idea probably. In your psalm, this story was buried in there. This whole situation was buried in there because it actually happened before. When you read Psalms, it seems like a reflection, because it was, but it was also a prophecy. That's what's so cool about Psalms. It's actually a very prophetic book if you look at it. There's a lot of prophecies in the Psalms. So you can see this is over. It was mentioned in Exodus. It was mentioned in Deuteronomy. It's mentioned in your Psalms. So this is at least the fourth time. And there's probably more I'm not even listing. I didn't have time to go through my entire Bible like with a fine-tooth comb. Didn't have time for that this week. But you can see how it's just always been the plan. This is not new, and it's not hard to figure out because we have it elsewhere in the Bible. And even Daniel chapter 9 talks about destruction, these 70 weeks. It says in verse 26, after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. That's in Daniel 9, right before the abomination of desolation. It's talking about all that stuff. It even says the end shall come with a flood. Daniel tied it with this. This is why these words, these anchors are all important, because you can figure out what's going on here. Let's look at verse number 16. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. This one is another interesting one. But the earth came to the help of the woman. But here again, another divine reversal. God is stepping in. Satan thinks he's going to, win, but the woman again survives. The earth opened its mouth, it says, right? So the earth is personified. And, we've been having this language of the eagle flying, the dragon. You have this earth opening up and swallowing the river. But what's interesting, again, there might be some water aspects to this. And there might be some little aspects. And this is going to sound crazy to you guys. I think the dragon is symbolism. I don't think that's real. I think that Satan is referring to. I don't think there's going to be a real bird. But I actually think, this is crazy, I actually think the literal part of this, one of the literal parts, is that the earth is going to swallow them. I know I sound insane, but I did my homework. Because if you go to Numbers chapter 16, go back to Numbers chapter 16. It sounds crazy, and maybe not. Maybe this is symbolic. But this is why you got to have your Bible. I think there's some literal truth in here. Because we know the earth isn't really alive, but it does respond to the commands of God, because that's how this whole thing came to be. God speaks and creation responds. That's how he sends floods. That's how he holds winds back. Right? That's how he has all these things. Numbers chapter 16. Let's go to verse number 25. Remember, this is when Korah, Dathan, and Abiram are saying, hey, why is Moses in charge? We should be in charge. We're Levites. Who said you could be in charge? They're challenging, not really Moses, they're challenging God, really, right? Look, it says, then Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, depart, please, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest you be swept away with all their sins. So they got away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents, together with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. And Moses said, hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and that it has not been of my own accord. If these men die as all men die, if they are visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. Did any of you guys ever read that story and go, that didn't really happen? That was just metaphor and symbolic. That was, No. That was one of the craziest stories I ever read, but I knew it was true because it was in the Bible. It was pretty wild, but there was no symbolism in that. It's happened once, it can happen again. And actually, go to Exodus chapter 15 if you have the time. This is really wild. Exodus chapter 15, go back to the beginning of your books again. This is pretty amazing. Song of Moses. Remember what this is the Song of Moses, Exodus chapter 15, go to verse 8. It uses similar language. Song of Moses talking about celebration, how God has brought them through that Red Sea. Remember the Red Sea? It collapsed on who? The army that was chasing them, right? And it collapsed and killed them. And look what does they say in Moses' song, Exodus 15, verse number 8. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The flood stood up in a heap. The deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue. There it is. I will overtake. I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword. My hand shall destroy them. You blew with your wind. The sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? And look at this verse. You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. Isn't that interesting? This is all tied to the Exodus. This is all the Exodus story. What Pastor Brad's teaching in Exodus is what's happening here. It's a mirror. It's an exact mirror. And we're getting all this language. This is all old languages you're seeing. They're going to get swallowed up. It's that Exodus connection, right? And it says the dragon had poured from his mouth. John is reminding us, remember this attack is satanic, right? Satanic in origin. Whatever's happening, whether military, whatever, deception, it's all satanic. That's why he repeats, it came from the dragon. Let's try to finish this one up quick. We'll see if we have the time. Verse number 17, then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So, of course, Satan becomes furious and mad. Again, why? Because he lost the game, and there's still time on the clock, but the game's over, so he's furious. He's just causing fights now, right? And he went off to make war. He's back to war again. He was doing war in heaven. Now he's doing war on earth because that's where he's trapped, right? He's making war. And he's going to do that through earthly systems, which is a hint to us. He's making war on us today through earthly human government systems. He's been doing it forever, and he's doing it today. He's still attacking us, and he attacks us through people and systems. We're going to see when we get to that. But who is he attacking? The rest of her offspring. The rest of her offspring. So Israel. Who's the rest of Israel's offspring? Most likely other Jewish believers. So, for example, there will be Jewish believers that are connected to the Messiah that might not be in Israel. What if there are Jews in America and Jews in Iceland and Jews in China that come to salvation during the Lord? They're not going to be able to probably get there. They're not going to be able to get to Petra. That's why it says you in the hills of Judea. That's a special group of Jews that are hiding. There's other ones left. And if you remember the propaganda that's going to be out there, Anne Frank kind of stuff, hiding. And you're going to have Gentile believers. Remember when Jesus says he comes back and how did you treat my people, the sheep and the goats judgment? It's going to make a lot more sense to you. The other Gentile believers are out there feeding, hiding the Jews, even though they're not safe themselves. But who took care of them? They're going to have to hide out. They're not going to be safe. Which Jews will be safe? There will be Jews that will be safe. The ones you'll find later that take the mark. As long as you worship the beast, you're good. So those Jews are going to be fine, but he's going to talk about these evil Jews who won't even worship, won't even partake in this. You need to kill them all. And they're going to chase them. And when his military gets wiped out, imagine how angry he's going to be when he loses a lot of money in military. He's going to go for all the Jews that are still around. He's going to turn. He went from Jesus to Israel. They're getting away. And now he's going to look at all the other Jews, all believers too, because it does say, and those who hold the testimony of Jesus. But it's very much going to be focused on Israel and the Jews, because if he can wipe them out, he can eliminate God's promise. But there are some Jews that are protected, right? The ones that are here, and also the 144,000, don't forget about them. They're protected. They're out there somewhere as well, which is really, really interesting to think. But anti-Semitism, as you can see, is really going to be a tool in the end, and you can see it really beginning now. It says attacking those who keep the commandments of God. So really, again, why is he attacking them? You can see again behind it, because they follow Jesus. Again, it's attached to Jesus. He hates these Jews, and he hates these believers, and he hates all this, but it's really attached to Jesus, right? They hold firmly, remain loyal to Christ. They hold to the testimony of Jesus. That means the faithful witness of what Jesus has done in their life, and they're not compromising, right? These people are holding true. They're true believers. That's why he hates them, because they represent Jesus Christ. That's what this is all about. So it says he stood on the sand of the sea. And some translations get it wrong. They're going to try to put that John is standing on the sea. Even so, he saw this. But this is talking about the dragon standing on the sea. He's furious. I can imagine, like, if he were a dragon, he'd be blowing smoke and fire out his nostrils, right? But what does the sea stand for? Well, those are usually the chaos, right? The waters of chaos. Also, Gentile nations are from the sea. So he's standing there. And then there's also... you'll see later, he's going to call the beast from the earth, the other beast. But you can see, we're going to pivot into chapter 13. We're going to go right into the Antichrist, the beast you've been hearing about for so long, right? There's two of them, the Antichrist and then the false prophet. But I think what's happening here with this scene, it's almost like a cliffhanger, like if this were a season. Imagine if we put Revelation into season 1, 2, and this is season 12, this is our cliffhanger. It ends, and the credits roll after you see the Jews get in, they get saved, and you see him standing out and looking into the ocean, just furious. And the next scene, if you remember, out of the sea will come the beast. So it's a reflection back on this Antichrist, and this could be a reflection back even before the Great Tribulation. But this whole situation, the Antichrist is almost a continuation of this attack. That he's going to summon, like, all right, now I'm calling out my big guns. God took out my military, he stopped whatever else I did. Now I'm calling out my final kingdom. And that's where the sea language will come from. You'll start to see all that. So this is where Satan's war is heading. You can see how the end times now are starting to shift towards all of these things taking place. It's pretty amazing, actually. Does anybody have, we'll go ahead and stop there, because then we'll get into chapter 13 in a couple weeks, whenever I come back after Jade has the baby. But does anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts based on this or anything else they heard? Dave, go ahead.
This may add 2 or 3 weeks to Revelation.
Yes, all right.
Do you think Satan from Genesis to Job when he was the accuser to New Testament when he had Christ in the wilderness, even to this point again in Revelation, does he ever fully understand who Jesus Christ is?
That's a great point. That's a great point. Because the answer would be no, he doesn't really. Although he does know, which is weird, because he does know. He sees Christ. He knows who he is. He knows he's going to be conquered. He's read the writing. And so far, he's lost he hasn't won one. He's winless, right? He's winless. He has no wins. Yet he keeps trying to do this. So obviously, if he knew who Christ was, he wouldn't even fight. He'd just say, this is pointless. So in a way, he was saying he knows, but in his actions, he's showing he's not. And it kind of reminds me of, like, it's funny because we rip on Satan all the time. Like, give it up, dude. Like, how many times does God have to whoop your butt until you realize you're not going to get anywhere, right? But then think about this. I was thinking about this, actually. It's funny that you bring this up. I was thinking about this, and it's like, my son, Ross, sometimes he'll be like, hey, Dad, can I have some cookies before, like, after, like, no, you didn't have it. And then he'll ask me again later. And I'll say no, and I never give it to him. And then he'll ask me again, and he'll try to figure out a way to negotiate. And it's like, dude, this never works. But in his mind, one of these times, I'm going to convince Dad to give me the cookies. One of these times, I'm actually going to win. And that's wrong, because I'm the boss. And unless I want him to get it, he'll get it. But he's never going to outdo me. And that's the problem with Satan. He's just like a little kid that I'm going to get Mom and Dad. One of these times, I swear I'm going to do it, I know I never did it before, but this is the time. And you know people like this in your life. It's not even talking about kids and stuff, but you know this is the time they're going to do it, and they failed 100 times, and they didn't change their, you know what is that one saying? Like if you do the same thing and expect the different result, that's insanity, right? But these people that said, I'm going to do it this time, you're like, you did it the same thing, so you're going to fail again, right? That's exactly what's going on. And so no, like in a sense, if Satan knew it, he would stop kicking against the goads, as the Bible says. That's a great point, Dave. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions on all that? All right. Well, thanks again. Matt's going to cover for me next week. And Lord willing, read ahead. We'll be in chapter 13 whenever I come back. And we'll pick up from here. We're going to get into the Antichrist and all that fun stuff. So have a great week. Until next time, keep your lamps trimmed and burning.